Okay, hello everybody and welcome to session 2 of CSW's series of webinars, My Choices. This is an online program of webinars, each looking at a different aspect of career development and employability, and they're offered to young people in a wide range of educational settings, both those who are educated in mainstream schools and colleges, but also those who are educated at home. So today you'll be hearing from me, Dr. Oliver Jenkin. I'm a career development consultant at CSW Group, and the session will be entitled Getting Resilient for the World of Work. So this is what I'm going to hope to cover for you today. So we're going to first of all look at resilience and try and ask ourselves what we mean by that. What exactly is resilience? If we know what resilience is, why do we need that for our careers? Why is it important? How do we build up our resilience? Is it something that stays the same, or is it something that we can improve and develop? And lastly, we're going to look at where you can get more support with resilience and also emotional well-being generally. But as I said, we're going to start with thinking about what resilience is, and I thought it would be a good place to start with this would be to hear from other young people, to hear what they think resilience means.
I think resilience is the ability to bounce back and knowing what to do in the future when it happens again.
It's your way of dealing with something and managing to say to yourself, I've done this, I've faced this, but I'm not going to face it again. It's your way of combating something and the way that you're going to deal with it in future.
For me, emotional resilience is to be able to cope with life issues but also succeed at the same time.
Resilience is developing ways of coping with different and difficult situations.
So sort of building up a toolbox of ways to cope with them.
Resilience means being able to cope normally when there's things going on and still succeeding.
I think it's important to build up your resilience because you have a better communication skills with other people around the world, and also you have more confidence in the future.
Resilience is important because it's the way that you're going to deal with a situation. It's that you don't have to face the same thing again, and it means that your mental strength is just a lot better than it has been previously.
Resilience is important because it can help people deal with new situations and it can help people as they're growing up throughout their lives.
It allows you to be yourself in a way. That gives you that confidence to strive.
Emotional resilience is important because it allows people to adapt and to change their life so they can cope with anything that they're faced with.
To me, resilience is the power to come back up. So, like a bit of mud, you squidge it, and it gets really sad and squished and flat. So, you're upset, you're crying your eyes out, and then somebody comes along and they help you to come back up and be a thick piece of mud again.
Very good.
Okay, so we've had lots of different versions of what resilience means to those young people there. So it's something to do with how we cope with the difficult things in life. And it's something to do with, somebody said, having a kind of like a toolkit with you so that when the unexpected happens or when we encounter those times in our lives, which we all encounter when things are difficult and things don't go according to plan, we know how to respond to them, or we've got the ability to adapt and respond to them. So, what then do we mean by resilience? So it is the ability to cope when things are difficult or when they go wrong. And as a quality, it helps us deal with lots and lots of different challenges in life. And that can be things like when we've got to learn something new, whether that's at school or college or perhaps in the workplace. It's about trying our best when we feel stuck. All of us will have those times when we feel stuck, when we don't know how to tackle something, or we really don't know who to turn to. But it's that thing inside us that helps us keep on going and keep on trying rather than just giving up. So it is about feeling as strong as we can on the inside. And we don't always feel strong on the inside, and not every day anyway. But it is something that we can build, as we'll see in a minute. And it's also about getting used to new people and places. So whether those of you listening go straight into a job or something like an apprenticeship after you've completed year 11, or even if you maybe progress to college or to a different learning environment, there is that thing around having to get used to a new place, new people, being in a new environment, and it is our resilience that will help us cope with situations like that. So let's look at some famous resilient people then. So first of all, we've got somebody here called Nelson Mandela. So if you don't know Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela grew up in South Africa, and he grew up in South Africa at a time when the rights and living conditions of black people were not as equal as those of white people. They suffered discrimination, they couldn't do the same jobs, they couldn't go to the same schools, they couldn't use the same public transport. And he spoke up against this and pointed out the ways in which this was wrong and the ways in which this was discriminatory. And the South African government didn't like him doing this, and because of that, he had to spend a large part of his life in prison. And despite that, he still kept his hope alive that things could change in his country. People outside of South Africa campaigned for his release, and in the end, he was indeed released and became the first black president of South Africa. And he ended the system called apartheid, which put into law that distinction between how black people were treated and how white people were treated. So the next person we're looking at is Malala Yousafzai. Now this is somebody a little bit younger, who's lived a little bit more recently, but it's also somebody who has spoken up for the rights of people who have not had the same rights as others. And in her case, she grew up in a part of Pakistan where it was harder for young women to access education at all. And she experienced this kind of discrimination when she wanted to further her own learning and realised that there were those in her local community that didn't want young women to do this. So she campaigned against this, she spoke up about it, she didn't keep quiet about it, and rather like Nelson Mandela, encountered people who wanted to make her quiet and make her go away and not point out these injustices. And there was actually at one time an attempt on her life, so angry with the people who wanted to keep things the same. But Malala was able to be taken to the UK. She had an operation and recovered from her attack and was able to complete her education, and in fact went to Oxford University. And to this day she still speaks up for the rights of young girls and women globally to access education. And the final person we're going to look at is a little bit different. Now this is a very famous scientist called Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking's ideas are some of the most important in the world. The way he understood the universe changed the way everybody else understood the universe. Very, very important man. But he had to suffer with quite severe health problems. In fact, when he was in his 20s and was diagnosed with something called motor neuron disease, the doctors at the time really feared at one time that he would only have about 2 years left to live. But fortunately for him, and indeed for us, he lived for many, many more years than that, and published books, gave lectures, and was actually really, really good at explaining quite difficult scientific ideas to ordinary people like you and me. So all of these people here, in different ways, have shown the quality of resilience that we're talking about today. But we don't have to be famous to have resilience. It's something that all of us can develop. And it's important for all of us to really try and get a good understanding of why this is important for employers. Why do they like their employees to have resilience? Well, for one thing, we see that resilient employees are able to concentrate and do better at their jobs. So if you think about this, actually, if you're feeling resilient, so in other words, if you're feeling a bit more confident in yourself, if you're feeling a little bit more trusting in your own skills and your abilities, you probably are likely to concentrate on what you're doing because you're going to be worrying less, because you're not going to be doubting yourself. So in other words, we will do better at tasks if we can build our resilience. For the same reason, employees who have resilience get on well with others. And again, that's because they're concentrating on what they're meant to be doing with their jobs. They're able to focus on how to help out their teammates, their other employees. And as such, they actually find that, you know, other people are more willing to sort of help them out as well. So resilience is also good for teamwork and communication. They're good at solving problems because they're able to focus better. And also they don't get so upset when they make mistakes, which is just as well, really, because mistakes are something that we all make. We can't get through life without making mistakes. If we could do that, we wouldn't be human beings, would we? We'd be robots or computers or something. Actually, it's a good thing to make mistakes, because what scientists have realized by studying the brain is that we actually need to make mistakes in order to learn. It's a little bit like building a muscle. If you want to build stronger muscles, you've got to put your muscles under strain. You've got to lift heavier things than they used to. You've got to run a little bit further than they used to. And it kind of hurts and feels uncomfortable for a bit. But actually, what the body then does is it reacts and builds the body to be a bit stronger than it was before. And actually, in a funny way, it's exactly the same when we're trying to learn something. If we find it's hard, if we find that we're making mistakes, that's usually a good thing. You know, it does show that we're probably learning. But it was always good to ask others for help too. And most importantly, perhaps, resilient employees generally are happier and healthier people. So you might be sitting there watching this and thinking, well, okay, this is all well and good, but what about my resilience? How resilient am I? So I'd say, before we look at this, that all of us have our resilient days, and we also have our days when we don't feel particularly resilient. And that's absolutely normal. It's a bit like a seesaw. We might go from one side to the other. But saying that, we might notice that actually we may be the kind of person that thinks resilient thoughts more of the time, or thinks less resilient thoughts more of the time. So let's have a look at this then. So if you find yourself usually being the kind of person that sort of looks at something new that you've got to learn, or something new that you've got to do, and think, well, okay, this is new, I'm not familiar with this, but maybe I can learn how to do it, that would really be a kind of a resilient way of thinking. So if I get it wrong, that's okay, because I can learn how to do it better next time. That would also be a resilient approach to making a mistake. It would also be typical of a resilient person to think, okay, I'm not scared of trying new things. It might be unfamiliar to me, might have to meet new people, go to new places, but that's okay. I'm willing to try it out. It might actually be exciting too. So the opposite of this, really, the opposite way of thinking might look a little bit like this. If we tend to make mistakes and assume then that we're always going to make mistakes, that we're never ever going to get it right, that isn't really a sign of strong resilience. That might be a sign that we need to work on our resilience. If we feel that it's a bad thing if people point out our mistakes, that also is a sign that we need to do something with our resilience, because actually those people might be trying to help. And again, like I said, we do need to make those mistakes in order to learn. And if we try to avoid new things, or if we try to avoid change a bit too much, because it's a bit difficult to really, I mean, there's so much change that happens in life. Again, that may be a bit of a sign that, you know, our resilience is feeling a little bit fragile. It's something that we need to work on a bit. So with that thought, what can we do to improve our resilience? Can we do anything about our resilience? Well, it's a good idea, first of all, to look after our general health. So that's about eating healthily, eating a properly balanced diet, making sure we get plenty of exercise, and very importantly, making sure we get enough sleep. That last one is actually a very easy one to not do, particularly because we all have screens, don't we? We have lots of things that distract us in our lives, but it's dead important to have lots and lots of sleep, that we feel happy and healthy in the morning. Do take time to relax. Yes, we all have to work. We've got to do our academic work, and eventually we've got to go into the workplace and do paid work. And that's all important. You know, we all need to do our jobs, but it is also important to relax and look after ourselves. It's also vitally, vitally important not to bottle up difficult feelings or distressing feelings. So if you're feeling upset, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling sad or depressed, do try to talk to someone. And that could be a friend, could be a family member, could be a teacher, or any other adult or person that you trust. But the most important thing is to talk about it. Don't keep it all bottled up. I'm going to keep saying this, but don't feel bad about your mistakes. They're going to happen, they need to happen, and you need them to learn. And do feel good about your achievements. We all have things to feel proud of. We all have things that we've achieved. We don't always get things right in life, but whenever we do have our little successes or our big successes, never ever feel bad about celebrating them. It's really important, and you deserve to. So then, if we do find that we tend to have slightly more negative thoughts or less resilient thoughts, what can we do about those thoughts? Because they can be a little bit like a kind of a negative sort of thing sitting on our shoulder, whispering into our ear and kind of undermining our confidence. Well, it doesn't have to be like that. So, for example, we've got some examples of less resilient thinking here. So, I'll never get a good job. It's something that's never going to happen to me. I just feel disappointed in myself most of the time. Or however much I try, I just can't seem to finish anything. So it's a good idea, if we do notice that we tend to do this, to try and replace the thoughts and actually practice thinking more realistic and more positive thoughts. Now, that's important. It's no good to think something that's unrealistic and unachievable. So the opposite of I'll never get a good job isn't necessarily I can get any job in the world that I want just through thinking positively and just through my willpower. That would be lovely if that was possible. In reality, it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult than that. But a more realistic but still positive version of this thought could be, it may take time and it also might take effort, but eventually I will find myself a good job. If we tend to feel disappointed quite a lot of the time, if our disappointments or our mistakes are getting us down a bit, we could always say to ourselves, well, I'm always getting better. I'm always learning. It's a process. I'm not going to feel disappointed all the time. You know, things will eventually change. I've got to trust that I'm learning and that things will get better. And yes, if we're finding that it's just so difficult to finish things, we get distracted a lot of the time, we find it hard to organize ourselves, well, one thing we could always do is say, okay, well, I will change the way I approach my tasks and I will approach things one task at a time. So hopefully that's helpful there. Now, this is a nice quote. This is from another famous person. This is Michael Jordan. And if you don't know Michael Jordan, he's thought by many people to be the greatest basketball player of all time. And this is a wonderful quote from him about the importance of the mistakes that he has made. And it says, I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I have lost almost 300 games. 26 times I have been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. So you can see the people who've really reached the top of success in their careers really understand the importance of making mistakes and the importance of being resilient. Okay, so now for some homework, and it's going to be nice homework, I promise you. How can you, all of you listening to this, go away after this webinar and build your own resilience? Well, one thing to try and do is to notice your negative thoughts. We all have them. You might get them a lot of the time, or it might be only in certain specific situations. But when you notice them, try and write them down or something. Try and kind of put them into words and notice them. And if you do write them down, then maybe have a go at doing that exercise I just showed you and think of a different way of thinking about the same thing, but one that's more positive but realistic. And if you need a bit of help with this, like I said earlier, talk to somebody else to kind of help you put this into words. And once you've managed to do that, try repeating this every day. Because thoughts are a bit like a muscle, they're a bit like a habit. If we are in the habit of thinking negatively, it doesn't have to be like that. It's the thing we can change. We've got a little bit of control over it. And if we repeat these positive thoughts to ourselves, and almost like imagine that the resilience is something that's growing. Maybe it's a plant or a tree, and we're watering it with our positive thoughts and we're giving it all the nutrients it needs. It's something that will grow if we look after it in the right way. And in a funny way, our resilience is no different from that. Now, there are those times when our resilience gets knocked a little bit more than other times. And some people, maybe some people listening now, have other additional difficulties that they might need a bit of extra support with. So what we've got here are some websites and some sources of help that you might want to use. So if you feel, for example, that you're struggling with your emotional or mental health, then the first two links there, Young Minds and the charity Young Minds, and the website Kooth are excellent websites to use for this. Both of them have got lots and lots of useful information about looking after yourself, and Kooth has access to online counsellors who you can talk to confidentially. If you need some support with your careers options and you live in the South West region in Devon or Cornwall, then CSW Group, who I work for, usually can offer you some support with your options. Those of you listening who are home educated are also eligible for one-to-one support for us. So do get in touch with us if you do fall into that category. If you're feeling very distressed or even unsafe, I would say that Childline is a really, really good service to use. They've got a free helpline, and if you feel genuinely that you're in that kind of situation, do give them a ring. And lastly, don't forget that there's probably plenty of support in your school, whether you're formally in school, if you're learning at home, and also perhaps your local GP. So lots and lots of places where you can get support. There's no need necessarily to struggle with things on your own. Okay, so do we have any quick questions? Just going to leave a little bit of time just to see if anybody wants to type anything. If you are typing something while we're doing this, I will just mention that all of these webinars are being run all this week at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock daily. So if you gain something from this webinar and you're able to make it to our next ones, please do register, and we'd love to have you present. So I don't think we've got any other questions today, so thank you all of you for attending. Our next webinar will be tomorrow, that's Tuesday the 29th of September at 2 o'clock PM, and it will be entitled What Employers Look For in an Employee. So thank you all very much for attending, and we hope to see you next time.